The next speaker, as I read through their introduction, I affectionately have called them the mystery Irish golfer. Because he had the opportunity to go to Ireland and run around, and I think it was something like 44 or 45 golf courses, didn't pay a single dime for it, not for the trip, not for the link fees, not for anything that he went out there and did. He went out there and golfed, wrote a book on it, sent out a couple emails, and turned around and, I don't know, I think at the last count it made something like $15,000 or $20,000 for him for that email that he sent out about sitting around on the golf course all day for months on end up in Ireland. Apparently, that's what copywriting means to this next speaker. Great. I love it. He's also known, has been described as the best financial newsletter copywriter in the business. Katie Yackel describes him as that. He is the lead copywriter at Stansberry Research, which is one of the largest and most profitable financial newsletter businesses in the world. He's written some of the most successful investment newsletter promotions in the industry, bar none, period. Obviously, this gentleman has a little bit to tell us about the financial industry, copywriting, and creating a lifestyle of your dreams. So, let me make sure I didn't forget anything. He says this, you see, when you learn to write copy, it can make your life better in so many ways. And my question to you is, what way is that for you? Think about it. As you listen to the world's greatest financial newsletter copywriter, Mr. Mike Palmer. Come on up, Mike.
A few weeks ago, I had to let some copywriters go from my group. I work in Baltimore, and we have a group of about a dozen copywriters. And I had to let two guys go who had been with us for about a year. And that's a terrible part of my job, and I hate to give up on people, but sometimes people need a fresh start, and these guys did, and sometimes things aren't working out. But what happened next was I started to think a lot about why did these guys not work out? And I started to think about why do some people succeed in copywriting and some others fail? Why do some people go on to make millions of dollars and other people struggle and struggle for years and years? And, you know, typically when I come to this conference, I try to focus on a specific technique of writing copy, either how to write headlines or I've talked about big ideas and why they're so important. And that's what most of this conference is about. It's about learning techniques that'll make you a better copywriter. But today I'm going to talk about something a little different. I'm going to talk about what makes some people succeed and what makes some people fail. I'm not going to talk about how to write copy, but I'm going to talk about things that I think you need to do specifically to become a good copywriter. I've been in the business now for about 13 years in the direct marketing business, and the first part of my career was in the editorial side of the business, and then for about the past 8 or 9 years I've been writing copy. And I've trained a few dozen copywriters. And I think I've come up with some things that if you can put them into place will help you become a successful and wealthy copywriter. So, you know, these are some of the things that I wish someone had explained to me when I was just starting out. You know, when you come to an event like this and when you get involved in the world of copy, there's just so many things that's so overwhelming. You know, some people are telling you to do this. You've got, as Michael Masters said yesterday, you know, there's a 150-point checklist of things that you should do as a copywriter. But I'm going to hopefully narrow that down to just a few things that if you can do and get right over the next year or so, I think you become very successful. So the first piece of good news is that you don't need any talent to be a copywriter. And I know Michael Masterson said yesterday, facetiously, I think, that we shouldn't even interview people. We should just bring them in and start them in the copywriting process. And I wouldn't go quite that far, but I honestly believe that you don't need any talent whatsoever to be a copywriter. I believe I could take anybody in this room, and with a year of training, you could learn everything you need to know to make $100,000 a year every year for the rest of your life. And I read a great book about a week ago. I read it in a single day. I picked it up. It was fantastic. It was on this subject exactly, and it's called Talent is Overrated. It's by a guy named Jeff Colvin. And that's the premise of his book, is that everybody, even people who we think are born with these great natural talents, are not really, it's not their natural born talent that made them so successful. So he had two great examples. You think about people who we consider the most natural talents in history. You think maybe of Tiger Woods, the best golfer by far that's ever lived. And you think about Mozart, the best classical musician who's ever lived, the best composer. And so Jeff Colvin goes through and explains that these guys, yeah, maybe they had some talent, but you have to look at these guys' history, and you have to look how they were raised. They were both the sons of extremely domineering fathers. They started out extremely early on in learning their skill. You look at Mozart, and his father was a violin teacher, and so he wrote books and he wrote a course about how to teach someone how to play the violin. And this was a popular book for decades, and people used it for years and years to teach kids how to play music. And so he started Mozart out at an extremely, ridiculously early age, learning how to play music. And many people believe that even in Mozart's early years, his father rewrote much of his composition, and his father would never let anyone see his composition until he had approved it and probably rewritten a lot of it. And so people think Mozart was a great talent, and he was successful so young. And yeah, he was successful and wrote a masterpiece maybe when he was 21 years old, but you have to remember, at that point he'd been doing this for 18 years, And then you think about Tiger Woods, and it has a very similar story. His dad at the time had retired from the Army when Tiger Woods was born. His dad was working in Southern California, I think at McDonnell Douglas or one of those big Army contracting companies. His dad was on his second marriage, and his dad had become an avid golfer, and he had worked his way down to a single-digit handicap. And if you're not a golfer, that's very low. It means you're in the top 10% of golfers in the world. And so his dad was fanatical about golf. And he started teaching Tiger at a ridiculously early age. When he was 7 months, he got his first golf club. When he was, if you have kids, you realize how ridiculous it is. 7 months is, your kid can't talk. And so he developed a system where he could communicate with Tiger, he could communicate with someone who couldn't even talk. By the time they were 2, they were on the golf course playing golf together, practicing. And if you have kids, 2 years old, can't imagine being on the golf course with them, much less at a restaurant, So, Tiger Woods was winning tournaments by the time. And the other crazy thing he did was he set up in his garage, he set up a little driving range. He had a mat and a big screen, and he would sit there and hit balls for hours into the screen, and he set Tiger Woods up in his high chair in the garage, and he would just watch his dad hit for hours and hours and hours. This endless loop, So yeah, Tiger Woods was winning tournaments when he was 19 years old, but he had been playing golf for 17 years, So people think, wow, it's so young, but, Anyway, so my point is just that even these people who we think, wow, they're just incredible natural talents, you look at their history, and it wasn't talent that got them there. We think about copywriters, too. David Ogilvy's probably the most famous copywriter of the past 100 years, maybe the greatest, certainly one of the greatest. But he's got a pretty interesting story, too. He was a complete failure for most of his career. There was nothing in his early career that said he was going to be a great copywriting talent. He was, I think he was expelled or dropped out of school, and then he worked in a kitchen in Paris, and I think he was cooking and washing dishes there. And then I think the next thing he did was he was selling stoves in Scotland. And then I think from there he became a farmer in Pennsylvania. So he had this whole, none of this that gave any indication that he was going to be a great copywriter. So that's the good news. You don't need any talent to be a copywriter. But if it's not talent that you need, well, what is it? I think there are 4 things that you need, and I'll get to those. And I just want to say, too, that I don't believe I have any great talent at all. Yet I think I've sold as many financial newsletters as anybody in the world over the past 5 years. And I know that if I can do it, and I know if I can teach people how to do it, I've hired people who were pizza delivery guys. They were handing out tickets at a movie theater. It's not like I went to Harvard or MIT or went to the best journalism schools and tried to recruit people there. I want people who are hungry and who want to learn the skill and who are passionate about it. But they don't have to have any great talent. So if it's not talent, what are these 4 things? The first thing that you have to do is you have to find a mentor or a teacher or a group. You simply cannot write copy completely on your own. I don't know of anybody who's done that. And there probably are a few people out there, but they probably really do have talent. So for the rest of us, we have to get help. You know, the simple truth is that you have to get challenged and you have to get feedback on your work. You can write and write all you want, but if you don't get good feedback, you'll never know if you're getting better. The world's best golfers still go to teachers. You know, every professional golfer has a swing coach, and they have a psychological coach, and they have, they have a whole slew of people who are helping them. They have trainers. The world's best writers have editors who, essentially help show them what to do, how to put the book together, what to change. You know, no one writes a great book on their own, ever. You look at all of the great copywriters. They all had a mentor or a teacher of some kind. You look at Clayton Makepeace. You look at Gary Bencivenga. You look at Michael Masterson. You look at Gene Schwartz. All of these guys had mentors. And you simply have to find someone, a teacher or a mentor or a group who can help you. I know for me, there's no way I would be successful if I had decided to just do this on my own. I started out, and I was very lucky. I had Kathy Petticord at Agora who helped me when I was first getting in the editorial side of the business. I had Addison Wiggin when I was first learning to write copy. I had Michael Masterson when I decided I was going to be a freelancer, and I came down here and I moved to Florida and worked with Michael Masterson and Katie Yackel's group for a while. Then I started working with Porter Stansberry in Baltimore, and all these people, they're entirely responsible for my success. The thing about teachers, it's not necessarily that they know more than you, although when you're just starting out, they certainly will know a lot more than you. But they're able to see things about you and about your work that you simply can't see about yourself. And you know this is true if you've ever edited anybody's copy or if you've ever edited their work. It's very easy to criticize somebody else's work. You can see right away what's wrong with it, But it's impossible to do on your own. You write something and, wow, it looks great. Everything's perfect. And then you give it to someone and you realize, oh, man, that was terrible. I can't believe I wrote that. So, you need somebody to edit your work. You need somebody to give you feedback. And I like this quote. This was in the book I read. I like this quote from this guy, Steve Kerr. Practicing without feedback is like bowling through a curtain that hangs down to knee level. You have no idea what's happening, You can practice all you want, but you don't know if it's any good. So how do you get a mentor? Well, or how do you get a group of people? The easiest thing and the best thing is you come work for a group like mine. You move to Baltimore, and you spend a year or two working, and in a year or so, you'll be a great copywriter. And if you want to do that, really, you can do it. You just have to see me. I brought our 5 top copywriters in my group are all here, and we'll be here all weekend. If you really want to do that, you can. I know for most people that's not practical, and you're not interested in moving to Baltimore. But if you really do and you want to do that, that's a great option. We are hiring. We're here to recruit people. So if you're serious about it, come see us over the weekend. But I know for most people that's not a good option. You don't want to move to Baltimore. You don't want to move across the country. So what else can you do? Well, one thing you can do is you can find a deal where you find somebody, you work for somebody. I think Clayton Makepeace has done this for a long time, where you kind of have a long-distance relationship where he hires, I think he calls them his copy cubs. And I don't know exactly how this deal works at all, but the basic deal, if I was going to do this, is if I were in your position, I would pay this person, a percentage of my royalties or a percentage of the fees I get, and for a year or two, they would train me and critique the package along the way. And then at some point in the future, after a year or two of this, you go off on your own. So you can make a deal with someone like that. You can try to make a deal with someone like me who runs a copy group somewhere where you can say, look, I'll work for you and only you, and you'll give me assignments, and you won't have to pay me a lot of money, and I'll send you copy, and you'll give me feedback, and we'll do this for 2 years. So you can try to do that. But probably the best thing and the easiest thing is to simply form a copy group with the people who are here. Oh, the other thing that you can do is AWAI has a mentor program. That's the easiest thing to do. So I'm sure they'll tell you more about it, but that's a great thing to do. You can sign up with AWAI, and it'll cost you some money, but if you want to be successful, that's the kind of thing you have to do. You have to find someone who knows what they're doing to give you feedback on a regular basis. It can't be once a year a copy review. It can't be every 2 months when you turn in a package. It has to be all the time. So AWAI has a good option for that. But the other good option is to simply form your own copy group. And it's very easy to do, and to me, it's the best thing that you can get out of this weekend by far. You'll get a lot of great copy tips here and a lot of good secrets and techniques. But if you could walk away from this conference and have a group of a dozen people you've connected with, you've got their phone numbers and their email addresses, and you get back home and you start sending out, you kind of organize this somehow. I don't know how you do it, but you organize this group somehow, and you agree to have a conference call every week to either talk about something that someone's working on, or maybe you talk about an existing piece of good copy that's out there. So to me, that's a great thing. And I'm a shy person, and I think most people who are writers are typically shy people. So it's hard to get out, and it's hard to talk to people. But it's the one thing you have to do. Introduce yourself, and get a bunch of people's name and numbers down. And when you get back, you can try to work this out. And if you can do that, it'll make you successful so much faster. Second thing you have to learn how to do is you have to learn how to practice and what to practice to get better. As we've said, there's so many things. It's so overwhelming when you first get started in writing copy. But you have to learn what to focus on to get better, and it's not nearly as much as you think. I read this study recently about these British music students. I don't know if you probably don't know how the music system works in Britain. I don't know much about it either, except what I read. And apparently, the British are very rigorous about things and academics and training. And so, in their music program, there are grade levels. It's like 1 to 12, and when you start playing music in the UK, you get put on these grading systems. So they did this study of like 300 kids, and they wanted to find out, why are some kids graded all the way down to a 1, and why are some all the way up at a 9 or 10? So they looked at everything they could. They looked at IQ and intelligence and the parents' background and whether the parents were musicians or not, and how early they started or how late they started. And what they found was that none of that mattered at all. There was only one thing that mattered that determined how successful and how good they were, and that was how much they practiced. And so practice, we know, is something you have to do. But you have to know what to practice. You can't. There's so much to learn, and there's so much going on in the copy world that you can't just kind of go about it willy-nilly. One of my favorite stories about practice is about Jerry Rice. I don't know if anybody's a football fan, but Jerry Rice was by far the greatest wide receiver in NFL history. There are a lot of times in sports there's debate about who is the best, and when someone has a record, it's usually just a little bit more than the previous person's record. Somebody hits 60 home runs in a year, and someone comes along and hits 62 or 63, and breaks the record. But Jerry Rice has the record, and his records are so far above anybody else in football history that it's unbelievable. He has, the total yards receiving are like 50% higher than the next person. History, his total number of catches are like 50% higher than the person who's number 2 on the list. So it's incredible. And so Jerry Rice, I'll just tell you a little about him because it's an interesting story. He was a kid from Mississippi, from a pretty poor town, and his dad was a brick mason. And he didn't start playing football until, I think, his sophomore year in high school. And he played football for a few years. He was a good football player in high school, but nobody wanted him in college. There wasn't a single Division I school that offered him a scholarship. So the only place he got an offer was Mississippi Valley State, that's Division I AA school, basically, a second-tier school, second-tier program. So he went there. He set records in receiving, but still nobody wanted him in the NFL. He's not that fast, at least by NFL wide receiver standards. He's probably pretty fast. But people didn't want him in the NFL. And so he wasn't drafted until nearly the end of the first round by the San Francisco 49ers. And of course, from there he went on and he became by far the greatest wide receiver of all time. And Jerry Rice, what he realized and what he writes in his book is that he figured out the things that he needed to do to be great. And he wasn't that fast, so there wasn't much he could do about that. But he knew that he had to be incredibly strong because he had to be able to fight for people for balls in the air. He had to be able to hold on to the ball when huge people were trying to knock it out of his hand and rip his head off. So he had to be very strong, so he developed this ridiculous weight training program. No one on the team could keep up with him in the weight room. And people would write into the San Francisco 49ers and ask for his workout program, but they wouldn't send it out because they were afraid that people would hurt themselves because his program was so rigorous. So he knew he had to be strong. He knew he had to have great endurance because he knew that in the fourth quarter he had to be. This is when he would have his huge edge. If he had better cardiovascular endurance than the people playing defensive back, he'd be able to win the game. So he had great endurance, and he had a ridiculous training program where he ran hills, and he knew the other thing that he knew he had to do was he had to be able to make moves and to cut without tipping off his move to the defensive back. So he ran hills and he ran these trails, and he developed this crazy program for doing this. And so what happened was he became the best wide receiver of all time. So he focused on the three things that he needed to do. And he couldn't focus on everything, but those are the things he focused on. And in copy, it's the same thing. There are three things that I think you need to focus on if you want to be a great copywriter. You can't focus on everything. The first thing you need to focus on is you need to learn how to identify ideas that excite your reader. You have to know what's exciting. You have to be able to identify what's compelling, what's going to turn them on, what's going to turn them off. The second thing you have to practice and you have to get better at is explaining things simply, the sentence structure, explaining things clearly, putting sentences and paragraphs together so that they logically make sense and your argument moves forward. The third thing you have to get good at is you have to learn how to prove your ideas beyond any reasonable doubt. This is more difficult than it sounds. Most people think, oh, proof, well, I'll just put in some facts and statistics and I'll have some quotes from the USA Today and some newspapers and some experts. But proof is a very sophisticated thing, and you have to get very good at figuring out lots of different ways to prove things. There's many different ways to prove things. So these are the three different things that you have to learn. So what do you do to practice this? Well, there's one exercise that's by far the best, which is something that everybody should do. And if you want to be a great copywriter, you absolutely have to do this. This exercise involves simply dissecting great copy. So here's how it works. You find a piece of copy that you know has done very well. You've got the AWAI Hall of Fame book where you've got lots of examples. You should get on a list. If you're not on a list to receive lots of copy, you should do that. You should sign up for things like Early to Rise. You should sign up for the Daily Reckoning. You should sign up for Daily Wealth, which is our free email. And when you sign up for these free things, I don't care if you read the free stuff or not. The only reason you want to get them, in my mind, is that you want to get all the promotions. Every single promotion we write and send out goes out to the Daily Wealth list. Every single promotion that the Agora Financial Group writes goes out to the Daily Reckoning list. You can sign up for the Motley Fool's free letter. So sign up for a half dozen of these free letters, and you'll get lots of copy, more copy than you ever want to see, and more emails than you'll ever be able to deal with, too. But what you need to do is you need to look at the things that keep coming to you. And the way you can judge whether something's good or not is how many times you get it, basically. If we have a promotion that works, we're going to send it to you all the time. We'll send it to you probably 10 times. If we have something that doesn't work, you'll probably only get it once or maybe twice. So you take promotions that are good and you dissect them. And how do you do that? I was talking to our copywriting group before we came down to Florida, and we were talking about what are the things that made us most successful and what are some of the secrets that have helped us. What things did we do that made us successful compared to the people who didn't make it in our business? And so one of my copywriters said this about this technique that I'm going to show you. He said, before I began using this technique, I was a copywriting disaster. I had absolutely no idea what to write, where to start, or even what to think. Basically, I had zero confidence. Looking at a blank page with no direction is a daunting task. I thought good copy was about trying to be hypey as possible. You see, the good copy I was reading was simple, plain, and easy to understand, not hypey one bit. My brain, however, was exploding with excitement at the prospects of whatever the good copy was talking about. That's what good copy does. It's simple and lets the reader's fertile mind create the excitement. But when I tried to write copy myself, I translated what was going on in my excited mind onto the page instead of trying to understand what was actually going on in the copy. So what I do is, this is still the quote, what I do is I just look at winning copy, and in the margin I'll write down what the sentence does or why it's there. This technique forces me to think about what is really going on in successful copy. With each paragraph, you ask yourself, why is this here? What does it say? What is it trying to do? Why did this sentence come before the next or after the previous one? Then just simply write that down in the margins. So here's a little bit of what it would look like. And I know you're not going to be able to read this, but I'll kind of walk you through what happens. So what you do is you take a piece of winning copy. A lot of people talk about the fact that you have to read a lot of good copy if you want to get better as a copywriter. But you can't just simply read copy, because what happens is you get a piece of winning copy in your hand and you start reading it, and then something happens. And here's what it is. Here's what I believe happens. The copy is so good that you get sucked into the copy, and you don't really realize what you're reading. And this is true. If you read a good piece of copy, before you know it, you're on page 6 or 7, and you can't even remember what happened. The copy is so compelling. So you can't just sit there and read copy. It won't help you understand what the copywriter is doing. So what you have to do is you have to step back. You can read it through once, great. Then go back and you have to dissect the copy. And there are lots of different ways to dissect copy. One thing you can do, you can practice all of the things that I said you have to practice. You can practice looking at the big idea. Look at that idea. Why is that idea compelling? Think about it. You can look at the structure of the sentences and the order of the sentences. Why is this here? And you'll see how I kind of mark this up a little bit. You start with a unique idea, then you have a big promise, then there's proof, then you describe in the first few sentences this is something brand new, then you remind about the proof, then you introduce a skeptical statement. So what you're doing is you're kind of creating an architecture here. You're creating a structure that you can then go back to. And what we actually teach young copywriters to do is find a good idea, and after you do that, you just copy the exact structure of a winning package. Do exactly what that person did. Put your headline in, then have some line of proof, then have a skeptical line, then have a line of an example of someone who's done this. So what it does for you as a beginner is it gives you basically a template, so that all you have to then do is find the exciting idea, and you just put it in this template. So there are lots of things you can do when you dissect copy. You can look at ideas, why are they compelling? You can look at the structure of sentences. You can look at the different ways that somebody proves something. So you go through the package, and you'll be amazed, I think, when you look at a package, really when you're just looking for the proof points, go through there and circle everything that is proof, and you'll be amazed how much is in there, a lot more than you thought. And it's not just quotes. It's not just statistics. And then the other thing that you can do, we teach people to do this too, is you actually physically rewrite the package. And I think that's a great exercise too. So dissecting copy, that's the #1 practice technique, I believe, that you should do. And so this is, when I say a practice technique, this is in addition to your normal writing and research that you're trying to do. If you're working on a project, this is practice, and this is what you have to do every single day if you want to get good. And I read recently that Einstein did the same exact thing when he was learning to write. Apparently, he had been having some arguments by letter with a friend or colleague of his, and his dad found the letters, and he said to his son that, you were right in this, but you didn't explain yourself well in this letter, and if you're going to be successful, you have to learn how to write persuasively. And so what Einstein did, he developed this whole system on his own, was he got copies of The Spectator, which is a famous British magazine, started in like 1828, and widely considered probably the best written magazine, certainly during that time. And what he did was he went through articles, and first thing he would try to do is he would try to rewrite them in his own words, and then he would compare it to the original and figure out, well, where was his writing weaker than the original. And the next thing he would do is he would write what each sentence did or paragraph did, and he would write all of those on a separate slip of paper. And then he would mix them all up, and he would go away from it for like 2 weeks, and then he would come back, and he would try to restructure the order of what the argument should have been, and then he would compare it to the original and see if his structure was right. So if it's good enough for Einstein, it's good enough for us. And of course, there's more that you should do to practice. Michael Masterson's technique of writing every day, writing the 50 to 100 word mini leads, I think is a fantastic idea. And we don't do that in my group right now, but we're going to start it as soon as we get back. What we do for young writers, we encourage them to write headlines every day. We encourage them to write space ads that go into our email letters. We have them write space ads every day. And we have them try to write what we call our teasers, where we'll take a newsletter issue and they'll try to pick out the most exciting thing and basically write a promotion for this newsletter. And we try to have them do it in a single day. So I think you have to write every day, and I think you have to use the #1 practice technique that everybody should be using, which is learning how to dissect copy. So remember, there are 3 things that you need to practice as a copywriter. Learn how to find big ideas. Oh, sorry, not big ideas. Learn how to find things that are compelling. So you have to learn what your reader finds compelling, what turns them on, what turns them off. You have to learn how to write in a clear and simple manner. And you have to learn how to prove things beyond any reasonable doubt. Those are the three things. Those are the only three things you need to work on to be a good copywriter. So this is another example of marking up copy, going through and dissecting it, looking at each paragraph, each line to figure out what's going on. Third thing you have to do to be a successful copywriter. You have to learn how to be efficient, and you have to learn how to be disciplined. This isn't probably what you want to hear, but this is what you need to do. I know a lot of copywriters who have a lot of talent, and they're a lot less successful and make a lot less money than people who aren't half as good at writing copy. And the reason is they haven't figured out yet how to be efficient and how to be disciplined in their work. I don't mean that you have to work harder. I don't mean you have to put in more hours. I don't mean you have to slog, 8, 9, 10 hours a day at this. And you don't have to work every weekend, and you don't have to work at night. I think that's the worst way to do it. I don't think you have to work any harder than you already are, and I think you don't have to work that hard at all. You just have to be efficient and disciplined about it. And so here are the things that I do. And I didn't invent any of these things. I picked them up over the years from different people. But they work well for me. And I think you have to, I suggest if you don't have these things in place already that you give these a try. The first thing you have to do is I believe you have to become an early morning person, and you have to get your work done first thing in the day. I don't know of any prolific writer. I'm sure there are examples, but I don't know of any prolific writers who don't write early and don't write first thing and don't make that the most important part of their day. For me, I try to get up and I try to start to be at my computer at 6 o'clock, and I wake up, and I wake up at like 5 of 6, and I'm at my computer in 5 minutes, and I don't brush my teeth, I don't take a shower, I don't get coffee. I go straight to my computer and I work. And to me, that's the most important part of my day. And I try to get 3 hours worth of work in the morning before my kid gets up and my wife gets up and things are going on around the house. So, I know that even if I don't do anything else the rest of the day, I've put in 3 hours of writing and research. And if that's all I do an entire year, I'll still write 8 or 9 or 10 promotions, and I'll do very well. So for me, that's the one thing. I believe that you have to get up early. This is Michael Masterson's secret. This is who taught me this. Before he started writing Early to Rise, I was certainly not an early person. But I've become an early morning person, and I can't imagine going back away from that. Number 2 is you have to learn how to turn off your email, and you have to turn off your web surfing. Email is great, but it's the biggest time waster in the world. It's worse than TV. So you're not working if you're sitting at your computer and you've also got your email open and your email dings and you open up your email, and then before you know it, you're in a back and forth conversation with somebody and you're sending something else, and then you're online before you know it. So you got to get rid of all of that. You have to get rid of those distractions, and you got to be disciplined. So turn off your email. Michael Masterson has been saying this for years too, but I got this from Tim Ferriss, wrote a great book called The 4-Hour Workweek. If you haven't read that, it's a fantastic book. It's called The 4-Hour Workweek. It's been on the bestseller list for several months. And so what he recommends doing is he set up, I haven't done this, but he recommends you set up this autoresponder that in your email so that when someone sends you an email, it goes back to them and it says something like, I've started a new system, I'm only checking email once a day, and I'll get back to you when I can, or something like this. So everybody who starts sending you email gets this auto-response from you. So he recommends checking email, I think, once a day or twice a day at most. You can check it. And what I try to do, is I check it in the morning, I'll check it a few hours later, and then I'll spend at least an hour on it at the end of the day, because it's kind of a mindless exercise. You can do it at the end of the day, you clean out your email, and you get ready for the next day. Number 2 is turn off your email. Number 3 is a trick that Gene Schwartz talked about in Breakthrough Advertising, which is the best copywriting book out there by far, but it's a very difficult book to read. And you can't just sit down and read it. You have to read it in very small doses. We read it as a group. Last year, we would read 1 chapter a week and then talk about it together. And if you can start this copywriting group, that's a good thing to do. Maybe you could have a little book club, too, where you read a chapter and then talk about it. It's a very high-level book and very sophisticated. So anyway, Gene Schwartz, one of his techniques, he was a great copywriter for Boardroom. And you probably know this trick, but I'll go over it briefly in case you don't. The idea is that you need to have undistracted time where you're writing. So Gene's trick was he had this timer that he set for 33 minutes and 33 seconds. And he hit start, and he would sit at his typewriter or computer, or whatever it was he was working on. And the only rule was that he could not get up, and he couldn't do anything else. He couldn't, if the phone rang, he couldn't answer it. If he was thirsty, he couldn't go get a drink of water. He couldn't go to the bathroom. He had to sit there for 33 minutes and 33 seconds. And what happens is you sit there and you're not sure what to do, but you start tinkering with something and you start looking at the words. And before you know it, you're into it and you're writing. And then you keep going until the timer goes off. And before you know it, 33 minutes, is done like that. And so his rule was that you had to stop what you're doing when the timer goes off. You have to stop, even if you're in the middle of a sentence or in the middle of a thought, you have to stop what you're doing, take a break for a few minutes, go get a cup of coffee, go look at the paper, whatever you want to do, and then start again. And so for me, I try to do this, and I literally do this. And I set a timer, and I try to get 6 of these 33-minute sessions in a day. And if I do that, that's only 3 hours of work. But that's all I need to do. If I can write for 3 hours a day, that's a lot of time, and it's really concentrated time. Getting 3 hours of dedicated time is way better than spending 8 or 9 hours at your computer all day where you're kind of working and kind of surfing the web and checking email every few minutes. So those are the 3 things I think you have to do. If you want to be successful, you don't have to work a lot. You don't have to work that hard. You just have to be disciplined about it and efficient about it. We do reviews at the end of each year, and one of the copywriters who works for us, she just started using these techniques. And she has literally doubled or tripled her salary and doubled or tripled her royalty income that she'll get. And, she was kind of floundering for a few years, and we didn't know whether she was going to make it or not. But she's now a superstar copywriter and has sold more than anyone else in our business in the past year. And she says it's almost entirely from using these techniques where she just became more efficient. She doesn't work any harder, She takes a train an hour each day, each way, to get to the office, so she doesn't spend a lot of time in the office, but she's very efficient with her work. Here's the last thing that you need to do to be successful as a copywriter. You need to become an expert in one thing. I read another study recently, and this was also in this Jeff Colvin book about talent is overrated. And they did a study about chess players, and they were comparing masters level chess players to beginning amateur level chess players. And in the study, they showed these chess players, for 5 or 10 seconds, they would show them snapshots of a game in session, of a chess match in session. And then they asked them to recall as many pieces as they could, the exact position. So they did this with the amateurs, the club level players. They showed them the picture for 5 or 10 seconds, and then they asked them how many pieces could they recall. And at most, they could recall 5 or 6 pieces in the exact position. And then they did the same thing with master-level chess players. And, of course, the master-level chess players could recall every single position of every single piece in only seeing the board for 5 or 10 seconds. And it sounds like an incredible talent, right? But then they changed the experiment. And instead of putting the pieces in positions that you would find them in during a normal game, they put them in just totally random positions. So they had, pawns and the different colors were all totally mixed around. The colors were all mixed around, and you would never get into these positions in a game. And what they found was the master-level chess players, when they did this, couldn't recall any more than the amateur level. So it wasn't that they had a photographic memory or some extreme talent. What they had was an incredible knowledge of chess positions. And so the point of all of this is that becoming an expert in one thing, when you gain knowledge about whatever subject you're going to focus on, whether it's going to be health or business opportunities or travel or real estate or investing, as you gain knowledge in these things, you'll become a better and better copywriter. And it's the same way in copy. When a brand new copywriter comes to someone in my group who's a senior level copywriter or me, they'll say, where should this go from here? Or is this headline good or is it not good? And we can look at it, and in 5 or 10 seconds, we can say, well, here's what you should do next, or here's why this headline is good, or here's why this headline is bad, and here's how you should fix it. And the only reason we can do that is because we've been doing it for a while, and we've been just focusing on financial copy. We couldn't do that if we were working on all types of different copy. we wouldn't be able to, we wouldn't be any better than a beginner. If I were to go write health copy, I think I could do it, but it would take me a long time. I need to figure out, I don't know, what have they seen before? I don't know what's new to a health buyer. I'm not in that market, and I don't write health copy, so I have no idea what a good idea is. I simply have, there's no way I could know. I'd have to spend a lot of time studying it. So the point is that if you can become an expert on one subject, you don't have to do that every time you sit down to write a new promotion. If you're writing about just investing, you'll know what are kind of the hot topics. In the past year, the hot topics in the financial investment newsletter world have been currencies. Michael mentioned was talking about this kid, Ryan, who's written these phenomenal promotions. They've both been about currencies. And some of the hottest, probably the best promotions of the past 2 years, they've all been about currency. So that's the hot topic in the financial newsletter world. When you're selling introductory level newsletters, the hot topic has been income. People want to know how do they get more income from their investments. So I know what these hot topics are now in the investment world, but I have no idea what the hot topics are in the health world. And it would take me a while to figure it out. So that's one of the reasons that you want to become an expert on one thing. And there are two other reasons that you want to become an expert in one thing. And this doesn't mean that you can't ever write copy or that you have to make some decision that's going to lock you in forever. You start writing travel copy and you're stuck there for 10 years. It just means that you want to try one thing, and if you like it, stick with it, and stick with it until you get good at it. And occasionally dabble in something else because you're tired of writing about investing, or you're tired of writing about health. It's fine to do that. I do that when I write about travel, or I've written some golf promotions for my own book, and I'm working on something for another guy who has a newsletter. But I don't do it seriously. I don't do it to make a living. I just do it because it's a distraction. It's a side project. So there are two other reasons why you should become an expert in one thing. One is that you want to learn how to read copy like a reader rather than a marketer or a copywriter. So this takes a while to do, but it doesn't take an incredibly long time. It takes, if you do this for a few months, you'll be able to learn how to look at copy, and you'll react like a reader would react. You'll know I've seen this a million times before. This is total BS. I've seen this in promotions before. So you have to inundate yourself with enough copy, just like your readers are. Your readers are not stupid. They're smart, and they're hypercritical, and their BS meters are very high. And so you have to do that to yourself. They get copy every day. They're inundated with another promotion about another financial newsletter. And so you have to become just like them, where you are inundated with this copy and you feel the same things. Oh, it's the same thing I've seen so many times, or, wow, this is something new. I've never seen this before. So you want to be able to train yourself to have the reaction that your reader has. And this is kind of Bill Jamie, who's another one of the best copywriters of the past 50 years, has a great quote where he talks about, the typical advice in writing copy is that you want to think about one person that you're writing to. Imagine this guy or this woman. And think, how old are they? What do they do for a living? And I was never able to do that, and I could never figure out, it just sounded hokey to me. I couldn't do it. I couldn't really write to one person like that. I couldn't get this person in mind. And Bill Jamie says the same thing. He says, they asked him, who do you write for? Who is this imaginary person that you're writing for? He says, I don't write for an imaginary person. I write for me. And I do the same thing. If you become your reader in a sense. You become this person who is skeptical. So when you get excited about something, your reader will too. So that's one reason to focus on one aspect, on one field. Reason number two is that it takes a long time to get really good at something. The Beatles didn't have a big hit until Lennon and McCartney worked together for 5 years. They didn't write Sgt. Pepper. They didn't produce that album until they were together for 10 years. That doesn't mean you have to work for 5 years or 10 years to make a lot of money as a copywriter to get good. The 5 senior copywriters who work with me have become superstars. I would put any one of them up against any high-priced freelance copywriter in the industry, and I would bet anything. I would bet a week's salary that these guys would beat them. And none of these guys have been working here for 5 years. The most, I think, most of them have been working here have been working with us for 2 or 3 years, and they're absolute superstars in this industry, although no one knows their names, but I'm going to make them stand up back here. So in my group, there's Ned Harper. These are the senior copywriters. Ned Harper, Stephen Melise, Justin Gershwin, Greg Unoli, and Ryan Markish. So I get all the credit for what our group does, but those guys are the superstars. And when I first hired them, I was teaching them. But this is another reason to get your group together. But now I learn as much or more from them as they learn from me. And so you've got to get this is going back to the first secret, is get your group together. So you want to become an expert on one thing. It takes a long time to get good. And what you'll find is that as your knowledge accumulates, you'll get better and better. And I think for these guys it's true, and I know for me it's true, that every year I've been in this business, every year since I started writing financial copy, I've written more copy and I've made more money. And so if you can focus on one thing and become an expert in one thing, it becomes easier. You start to recognize, we had this the other day in our office where we said, oh, we had an idea for a package, and someone said, oh, you should just do that, just like the rogue trader idea, And so to most people that means nothing, But if you're an expert in this field, you know exactly what all the classic packages are. And you see something and you have an idea and you think, this reminds me of this, or this would be good if I wrote this package exactly like this. So it becomes easy for you just to knock off an existing package. Of course, the copy is all brand new, but you copy the structure and you copy the ideas of something that's out there that's done very well. And then there's one final advantage of becoming an expert in one thing, and that is you learn to, one of Gary Bencivenga's secrets, one of my favorite Gary Bencivenga secrets, is that you only write for great products. And when you become an expert in one field, you learn what the good products are. And good products, when I say great products, it means two things. One, it means that the product itself is very good and that it's going to help people. There's nothing worse in the world than having to write copy for something that you think is crap. You can't get excited about it. And if you find yourself in that situation, I would honestly try to get out of the project because you won't feel good about yourself and you'll have a very hard time writing copy. So you've got to believe in the product. So one of the great things about becoming an expert in just one field is that you learn what the good products are. You know what the bad products are. You know what the good products are. The other aspect of a good product is one that sells very well. So you want to write for products that sell very well. You don't want to take on a job assignment and someone says, oh, well, what kind of I have freelancers call me all the time and they'll say, well, what do you need a promotion for? And I'll say, well, we can't sell this and this, and say, oh, well, I'll take a shot at that. And typically what I'll say to them, well, that's great that you're willing to do that, but I'd much rather you write something that has a shot of working. There are certain products that you just can't sell very well. And so you should always be looking for, when you're looking for products, you want to write for the thing that is the best-selling thing in the world. You don't want to write for products that have never sold. And it kind of sounds counterintuitive because you want to be the hero and you want to write for something that hasn't sold, and it means there's still a big market for it. But what it probably means is they've tried to sell it a lot and they just can't sell it. So you want to write for products that you believe in, and you want to write for things that have sold very well. So just to sum up, remember, you don't have to have any talent to be a copywriter. You just need to do 4 things. You need to find a teacher or a mentor or a group. You got to get good at the 3 most important things about writing copy. That is learning to identify compelling ideas, learning to write clearly, and learning how to prove things beyond any reasonable doubt. You have to learn how to become efficient and disciplined in your work, and I recommend that you become an expert in one thing. And as I said, you're going to be exposed to a lot of stuff over the next 3 days, and a lot of great copywriters and a lot of good techniques and secrets. But try not to get too overwhelmed. Get everything down, and don't worry about digesting it until you get home. But the most important thing that you can do while you're here is to meet other copywriters and try to get your group together. Just get a bunch of names and email addresses. Talk with AWI about joining their mentor program. Or if you really want to, talk with me or any of the guys in my group about coming to work with us in Baltimore. I guarantee we can turn you into a 6-figure copywriter for the rest of your life.